Yes, and please start. I'll just give the introduction. We can see you. Yes, Jameela. Yes.
Yeah, fine.
So welcome to all of you who have accepted our invitation and joined this webinar. I'm very happy that we are having quite good participation. I welcome all of you, and as usual, without wasting time on formalities, I will just straight get into the program. I welcome all office bearers, functionaries of AWC, members from across the country who have joined, and all friends and well-wishers of AWC who have joined us. I'm very happy to introduce Professor Dr. Jameela Begum. Jameela was the head of the department and professor of English in Kerala University. She is a very well-known academician and education administrator. She has been associated in Kerala University. She was the Dean of Faculty of Arts, member of the Senate, and member of the Academic Council. In addition, she has been associated with a number of leading universities across the country and abroad, including the English and Foreign Languages Central University, Hyderabad, Vishwabharati Shanti Niketan University, Calcutta, Central University of Kashmir, University of Kakatiya and Warangal, Jamia Millia in New Delhi, Universities of Pondicherry and Gandhigram, and she was awarded fellowships by British Council and the Government of Canada. She has been associated with the University of London, University of York in Canada, universities in Australia, and University of Tokyo. And she is very well known for her Canadian studies work. She was president of the Indian Association for Canadian Studies, as well as secretary of the International Council for Canadian Studies. So I mean, there is a lot that I can tell you, but due to paucity of time, I'll stop here. A very warm welcome to you, Jameela. Now you can start sharing your screen and start your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you, Usha, for that very warm welcome. Let me first of all thank the AIWC for giving me this opportunity to talk about a writer who has just come into prominence, especially with the Nobel Prize that she got in literature in 2020. And I'm particularly thankful to Usha Nair, who invited me and made this possible and giving me a forum to share my own reading of Louise Elisabeth Glück. My first slide, you can see my first slide shows that she was born in 1943. So she's 77 years old now. And I have a photograph of her for you where she is at her typewriter. And one of the fascinating things about this great writer is that she started writing when she was just 25 years old. In fact, she had already dabbled with writing even from her young age. Her father and mother promoted her in her writings. 50 years, written extensively, and the body of her poetry is really voluminous. And it is no wonder that she was categorized and shortlisted in the Nobel Prize panel. And all women over the country, I'm sure, are happy that she, a woman, has been chosen as a Nobel Prize winner for literature. Interestingly enough, there are not many women who have won this prize, in spite of the fact that over 100 Nobel Prizes have been given in literature over the years since the Nobel Prize was launched in 1901. She is the second American to win the Nobel Prize. The first one was Toni Morrison, who was an African-American writer for her novels. So in effect, you would say she is the first poet of America to have won this award.
Can you put it on slideshow? You can start the slideshow so we can see better then.
Can you see? I think somebody has drawn on it. I don't know how
No,
to
that
erase
you
it.
don't worry about it. Just go to slideshow and start slideshow.
So we find that here is a writer who has written extensively, over 650 pages or so, in the last 52 years. And for a woman to be writing so voluminously and with so much of intensity is something that really deserves great praise. And I'm sure that this honor that has come to her she is worthy of it. Now, I would like to read out the first line of the slide that I have for you here, which are her own words, where she says, I feel alive when I write. I write to discover meaning. Writing is a revenge against loss and pain. And from the beginning of time in childhood, I thought that pain meant that I was not loved. You find that here is a writer who writes about loss and pain. And that is why many reviews that came of her books soon after the Nobel Literature Prize was announced said that she was very biographical, that it was the personal that she was trying to write about, her own childhood, her teenage years, and later her married life, her relationship with her parents. So you find throughout her works, right from the first work of hers, which is called Firstborn, and very symbolically, it was the firstborn of her writings. And she began to write about herself. So the self is central, the personal is central in her poetry. And the persona that she projects in all the poems, what one finds is that there is this urge to survive. And even if you look at her poems, one finds that in a poem like The Wild Iris, which won the Pulitzer Prize, she writes, it is terrible to survive as consciousness buried in the dark earths. So how does one survive in a world that is full of trauma, that is full of negative feelings, that is full of negativities? So you find that the poems itself become a diagram of the harrowing and enduring experiences of a writer who is trying to find life as something that is a rebirth of the traumatic experiences that one has had in life. If you look at the body of her poetry, what one finds is that here is a writer who has dwelled deeply into herself, the personal, and has come up to talk about not just herself, but about all women. Women who go through traumatic experiences in childhood, women in their teenage years go through experiences that are very personal to women. And when women launches into a married life, there are other challenges that she has to meet. So it's a kind of narrative where you have the personal transcending the very personal to become the political, the communal, or what you would say, the community's feelings or the women's feelings at large. Now, very quickly, I would like to look at her biography. Some of you who have joined in perhaps would like to
me,
know
Jameela?
where she was born.
Jameela, can I just disturb you for a minute? Can you put it on slideshow so that they can see better?
Yeah. Okay. Can we see now?
Yes, and you say from current slide, or you can just go on. Yeah.
You can see now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So a writer who was born in 1943 brought out her first collection of poems in 1968 when she was just 25 years old, as I said. She is now 77 years and lives in New York, and she grew up in Long Island. Her father was a descendant of Hungarian Jews and her mother of the Russian Jewish descent. Gleek's father also wanted to be a writer, but he never was able to become one. But he instilled in her the desire to write. But unfortunately, during these years, well, to an illness called anorexia nervosa, which is an eating disorder. And during these years of what you would say the growing up years of a girl, which are very, very critical, she had to leave her school and go and seek medical aid. So she had to undergo psychoanalytical treatment for almost 7 years. So there was a break in her studies, and it was much later, after 7 years, and after she had overcome her illness, she attended Sarah Lawrence College and Columbia University. And here she was exposed to poetry and the poetry workshops that she attended during the period 63 to 66. And then came her firstborn in 1968. Gleek had very unhappy marriages. Her first marriage was only for 1 year. The second marriage lasted for 10 years. She had a son by the second marriage, but again, unfortunately, they were divorced, and now she leads a single life. Some of the tragedies that overcame her were not only just those of the family, but also in terms of the way in which her poetry was being received, the way in which her own life was being threatened by forces, uncontrolled forces, I would say. For example, we find that in Vermont, when she was staying in Vermont, her house was burned down by a fire and she lost all her possessions during that time. So when you look at a poet like uh, Gleek, what one finds is that a series of disasters, a series of unhappy events in her life. Naturally, one would expect such a woman and poet to become disillusioned with life, disappointed with life, but what we find in her is very well expressed in her collection, The Triumph of Achilles, where she says that whatever be the impediments, whatever be the challenges, the resilience of the woman is something that is restored and she comes up with new vigor. And I think this is the message that she has for all women across the world. A resilience of women to meet challenges, to rise to the occasion, and to overcome that. And this is what, in poem after poem, she tries to tell us. She has also won numerous literary awards, including the Pulitzer Prize, the National Humanities Medal Prize, the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Award, the Bollingen Prize. So a long line of uh, awards and recognitions came her way. 2003 to 2004, she was the Poet Laureate. And today, we see her as a Nobel Prize winner in literature for her unmistakable poetic voice that with austere beauty makes individual existence universal. And that's what I've been telling you, that the personal has become the political because it talks about not just an individual, but it talks about existence that is universal. Now, having said that, I would just very briefly go through some of her collection of poems. The Firstborn, which was published in 1968, had a few poems where she was trying to come to terms with her relationship with her mother. She was born after the death of the first child in the family. So there was already this feeling of unhappiness in the house as she feels it when she was born, followed by a sister who was given more attention. So sibling rivalry was very strong in her right from the beginning of her career and the beginning of her writing. She felt that she was not the loved one. She had lost the love of her parents. Now, in the next collection, The House on Marshland, in 1975, here is a group of poems that particularly addresses nature. I'll come back to that a little later. In the next two collections, Descending Figure and The Triumph of Achilles, she makes use of myths, classics as the intertext to her poems. The collection 1990, Araroth, was a collection that came out after her father's death. And this is a poem, as the title suggests. Ararat is the mount on which the Noah's Ark, after the floods, was reported or was said by the Bible to have rested, and where a group of people were saved. In this collection of poems, in spite of the flooding, in spite of everyone being killed, except a few chosen one, the Mount of Ararat stands as the peak of existence rather than of death. Her first, her next collection, which is called Wild Iris, which was published in 1992, and which I think is the best of her collections, for which she was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. She followed it up with Meadowlands in 1996, Vita Nova in 1999, Seven Ages in 2001. October 2004 came soon after the September 11 incident, and she talks about the September 11 incident in this poem, which she calls October. Averno 2006 is a poem where she makes extensive use of myths, and she talks about Averno as one of those lakes that leads to the underground or to another life. A village life, very significantly, is about any village in the Mediterranean. And here what we see is individuals and people living a very rural life. Poetry comes out of this rustic rural life. All these together were collected in poems 62 to 2012, and that is a body of poetry which runs to over 650 pages. So the entire collections up till then. In 2014, she published Faithful and Virtuous Night, which was the winner of the National Book Award. Now, in 2021, we are told she is going to bring out her next collection of books, with poems, which is going to be called Winter Recipes from the Collective. And I think we will all be looking forward to this publication in 2021. So a writer who has a long tradition of writing. Now, what does she write about, and what constitutes the kind of, what makes her a Nobel Prize winner? We know that Nobel Prize winners are often chosen for their contribution to society, for their contribution to a particular race, like I said, African Americans when Toni Morrison was chosen. Here is what you'd say, with a Jewish background, a winner with a Jewish background, talking about her life in America, but using a terrain that spreads all over the world, particularly Europe. So it is not, she's not a writer who confines herself to America only. She is a writer, she is a Nobel Prize winner for the world. This particular collection, The Wild Iris, the wild iris is actually a symbol of nature. It is a symbol of the bounteousness of nature. It is a symbol also of the simplicity of nature. Because like the leaves of grass that Walt Whitman had talked about in his seminal work, American work, every blade that comes out of the earth carries it with it a purple flower, and that is the iris flower. So a woman, writer again, placing her within a garden, and placing her in a garden where flowers are intelligent and they have emotional voices. Flowers talk to the poet gardener, flowers talk to a spiritual deity in the garden, and it is this language of nature that has a meaningful system of symbolism. Why do these poems particularly appeal to us today? We have to remember that we are moving through a period where everybody is contained in their houses because of the pandemic. Here is a poet who's leading us by her hand into a virtual, visual garden of beauty, of scent, and of perfumes, and of visual side colors. Here is also a poet who's trying to tell us that nature is something that is a part and parcel of our own selves, of our own being. Maybe we can trace her back to the romantic tradition of nature. She herself has said that Keats was an influence on her. And we all know that Keats was a poet of sensuousness, the romantic poet of sensuousness who appealed to all the senses. In Gleek, also, what we find is this language that makes you feel that every flower is something that every flower, when it's open, has a message to give us. I have here a poem. I'm just taking a poem here to explain what I have just said. This poem is titled Snowdrops. And snowdrops can be interpreted in two ways. Snowdrops are actually flowers, like snows that come out of the earth in early spring. Snowdrops are also drops of snow that fall from the heavens, and it falls on the ground and melts. It does not stay. It is something that is ephemeral. So there is a spirituality contained in the title itself. Our own lives are, in fact, wound up with these feelings of transience and permanency. We all realize that our lives are transient. You don't know what is going to happen the next day. You have a feeling that time is a factor that you cannot change. Change is something that is continuous. Time is something that keeps on change. So all these are woven together in the very title of the poem, Snowdrops. I just read out the poem and then we come back to a very short analysis of it, because I think that will help you to get a feel of the writer. This is how the poem goes. It starts with a question. Do you know what I was, how I lived? You know what despair is then. Winter should have meaning for you. I did not expect to survive, earth suppressing me. I didn't expect to waken again, to feel in damp earth my body, able to respond again, remembering after so long how to open again in the cold light of earliest spring. Afraid, yes, but among you again, crying, yes, risk joy in the raw wind of the new worlds. So the poem itself tells it all. It is the snowdrop talking to the poet. And the snowdrop is, in fact, reflecting what the poet herself has gone through. Of the despair. You know what despair is then. You know how I lived. Why? Because in winter, everything goes under the earth. I did not expect to survive. Earth suppressing me. So this is also, if you read the poem psychologically, it's a poem, if you make a psychoanalytical study of the poem, this can take you to Julia Kristeva's concept of how the mirror image in each one of us surfaces. By the mirror image, I mean that when you look at a mirror, the self that you see there can be a social self. It is not your real self, in the sense that the mirror projects what you want to see of yourself in the mirror, what society wants to see of you in the mirror. So who are you? So we go back to the question of what are you and who are you? Winter should have meaning for you, because winter is when everything is dead, everything lies dormant, but then you survive. I did not expect to survive, earth suppressing me. I didn't expect to waken again, to feel in the damp earth my body. So here is a writer who is also conscious of the female body. The female body that is in the damp earth and responding again and again, remembering. How does a body remember? Now, throughout her poems, one finds that the body and the mind, the heart and the intellect are not separate from one another. They are, in fact, fused. So if you go through her poems, you find a jigsaw puzzle of the mind, the heart, the body, the damp earth outside, the human relationship. So where does she really place herself? It's not in any one corner of it, but in a totality, she is making this cry, crying, yes, risk, joy. Now this is what we would call a way that a poet uses in order to give us this feeling of being or feeling many things together. You cry, and when you cry, you never say yes. You say yes when you want something, and you risk something when you know that it is going to be dangerous, it's going to be a challenge. But at the same time, you know that the cry and the joy, it is a cry of joy that you have at the end of it. So the way in which he suppresses meanings, the way in which, as she says, the earth suppressing me, in the similar way that the earth suppresses the snowdrop that that yearns to come out of the earth and to flower once again and to welcome the spring, the human mind and the human body is also suppressed in different ways. It may be different for different individuals. For all of us here listening to this, the suppression of our mind, the suppression of whatever we desire, the suppression of the cry of grief, the cry of joy, happens at different levels. But Bleak is trying to tell us that here in the raw wind of the new world, we still surface. There's a raw wind in the new world, because when you say it is a raw wind, it is also to suggest that this is a wind that is young, it is raw, it has not been churned into maturity, it is raw, it is like a child. So every word that she uses in this poem, particularly the dampness of the earth, is like the dampness of the human body, the dampness of the grave to which the human body also ultimately goes. So what makes her a great poet is this wedging together of so many thoughts and images, so many different levels of interpretation, so much of depth in a poem. That is what makes her a great poet. This is the
Jameela,
title
can
poem, The
I
Wild Eye.
just make an announcement?
Yeah.
If the call gets disrupted, please click on the link again and you can rejoin. Yes, Jameela, please go on.
This is the title poem of the called The Wild Iris. And this is what she says about oblivion. In the last poem, she talked about remembering. I tell you, I could speak again, whatever. Returns from oblivion, returns to find a voice. From the center of my life came a great fountain, deep blue, shadows on azure seawater. Now, when you look at the other poem that we have just read, The Snowdrops, the early spring, and the deep blue color of the waters and the azure sea water, what you have here is a rebirth through the earth and the water. It almost reminds us of T.S. Eliot, and in many of her other poems also, there are overtones of T.S. Eliot, particularly his notion of tradition and the individual talent, because writing is always based on a tradition, on what has gone before, and what Harold Bloom calls the anxiety of influence. You are under the influence of many writers who have gone before you. But when you write, it is your voice that has to come out. And that is why she says, I tell you, I could speak again, again for a different stance, again from another voice, to find a new voice. So because oblivion returns, everything, there is a kind of cyclical movement to life, to thought, to feelings. And this is what all feminists have all talked about, particularly the cyclical periods of a woman's life. The cyclical periods that are sometimes associated with menstruation. They are associated also to the different way, the cycle of a woman's life, because there is no beginning and no end, as T.S. Eliot would say. Now, going back to the other poem, Snowdrops, I would also like to draw your attention to a poem which is called Snowdrops, which was written by Ted Hughes. I was talking about was this one where we're talking about the wild iris, and which says in the poem, I tell you, I could speak again, whatever returns from oblivion returns, to find a voice from the center of my life came a great fountain. Now the focus is on the center of her life, and what we find different from, say, a male writer. Now, I wanted you to draw attention to Ted Hughes, who has written a similar, not a similar poem, a poem that is titled Snowdrops. But here, the emphasis is on the mouse under the ground rather than the flower as such. So the way the woman looks at nature and how a male gaze is so totally different is something that perhaps makes us women feel that here is a writer who is looking at the simple things of nature just like any ordinary woman would, just as we would like to look at the beauty of nature. Now, this is a poem which is called The Triumph of Achilles. Now, I'm looking at this poem mainly because I want to talk about her relationship with her father and her mother. Throughout her poems, we find there are references to her mother, who was a very dominating figure and who always wanted her to be a writer. In fact, Lily, for some time, she wanted to be an actress, and it was only much later she came to writing after she took part in the poetry workshops. Her father could also paint very well, and he also had wanted to be a writer. The father and the mother figure in her poems, we find, are parental figures who stand for certain feelings, certain commanding positions. The father takes a very dormant position with a newspaper over his face. And as you read those poems, you get this feeling this is something that happens in your own house as well. The father with a newspaper over his head, while the mother wants and imagines about going to different places, seeing places. There is also the figure of the father tying the mother with a lead to her ankles, not in literal terms, but very symbolically. And the woman of the house is never free to roam as she really wants. So this dichotomy between the father and the mother figure runs through all her novels, all her poems. Now, in this particular poem, "The Triumph of Achilles," she is this is a part of the poem that I've taken out, which is called metamorphosis. And as we know, metamorphosis is a term that we see in terms of something that changes. You metamorphose into something else. And here also, this father figure metamorphosizes into another totally different figure, and the way he relates to the poet. This is what she says: "I'm going to live without you, as I learned to live once, as I learned once to live without my mother. You think I don't remember that? I have spent my whole life trying to remember. You can shock me now, I feel. No coldness that can't be explained. Against your cheek, my hand is warm and full of tenderness." The coldness of the dead father and the metamorphosis that happens to him in terms of leaving this earth and moving into another world. And she says, "I'm going to live without you." But at the same time, she says, "I've spent my whole life trying to remember." So can you forget and remember at the same time? This is the dichotomy that runs throughout her poems. There is a certain coldness and a certain warmth in the hand. The coldness on the cheek and the hand that is warm. So the Triumph of Achilles, the title is itself very significant because, as we know, Achilles' heel was the weakest point that made him human. The rest of him was a godlike figure. And because of that, no harm could come to him. And only if he was harmed on his heel would he die. And this is what happens to Achilles in mythology. But here, she is not talking about the death of Achilles, but she's talking about the triumph of Achilles. And she's trying to say that It is human nature that triumphs over all saintly gifts that you may have, or godly gifts you may have. You may have a lot of godly gifts, but what eventually makes you strong is the human in you. So here is a poem, once again, that talks about feelings, that talks about death, the dead father, that talks about remembering. You cannot forget because you remember again and again. Like, to live without my mother, you think I don't remember that, but that again is a recurring, what you say, a life pattern where you are never able to go out of the cycle of human existence. Just as Achilles is caught in the human predicament, and taking it as a challenge and triumphing over it, we find the poet also, Greek also, tries to get out of that. So many of our poems, I'm not going into detail on that, but many of our poems rely on mythological characters. And one very interesting fact that I found in the reading of her poems is that she makes constant references to women figures in mythology, like Persephone, Penelope, Dido, the Queen of Carthage. So we find these women are all seen as either betrayed or abandoned by the men. We know that Ulysses abandoned Penelope. We know that Persephone was taken to the underworld by Hades. The Queen of Carthage, who was abandoned by Aeneas, who went to fight the War of Troy. So abandoned women, or what is the position that man takes in relation to a woman, is also a recurring theme in her. Now, this particular poem, Gretel in Darkness, I'm sure most of you would now recognize the Grimm's tale of Hansel and Gretel, the two little children who who were put out in the forest by their parents because they went hungry and did not have food to feed the children, and how they come back. Now, this is a reworking of that myth. One of the things that we find in Gluck's poetry is its intertextuality. It is a reworking or a layering of a number of poems that have been written earlier, or it is a reworking of myths and tales and stories. And Gluck herself has said that nobody tells new stories. They are always old stories that are told and retold. Uh, this part which I want to read out to you, which is very significant for the world today, is this. This is the world we wanted. And this is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Is this the world that we really wanted with all that is happening around us? All who would have seen us dead are dead. All those who have gone before us are dead. And we are still alive. All those who want us to be dead are dead, but not us. But we are alone here in the stillness. And she goes on the last line to say, it is real, real, that black forest and the fire in earnest. Today, when we look back, we see the black forest and the fire that has taken away all our forests that have been cut down. The world today is not what we have wanted, what we wanted. And this is what Gretel also says in this particular poem. After she has come back and is shut up in the house with her father, very safe, she brings back all the gold from the witch's cauldron, but yet happiness eludes. So in other words, addressing very seminal issues of happiness, of life, of joy. In this next one that we have here, Village Life, which was published in 2009, we have, as I said earlier, vintages of village life, what happens in a village. And a very significant poem that we have there is Burning Leaves. This is what happens every autumn when every household gathers up all the leaves and burns the leaves so that a new year begins. But look at the way in which she puts it to tell us that burning does not mean death making room for life, because you can burn down the house as well. So, is life and death two sides of the same coin? Do you finish off 1 year and death, and then you start a new life again, but the house always continues to burn because nothing exists between the earth and the dark? We live in a dark world. This is again the notion of uncertainties that she talks about, the death and uncertainty that await as they await all men, the shadows evaluating me because it can take time to destroy a human being. The element of suspense needs to be preserved. On Sundays, I walk my neighbor's dog so she can go to church to pray for her sick mother. So the notion of death, uncertainty that await us as they await all men. This is not personal. This is something uh, that is relevant for all society. It is relevant for all men and women on earth. The shadows evaluating me because it can take time to destroy a human being. And the last two lines also gives you the sense that, but we continue to have to live our everyday life with our simple pleasures, helping one another. This is a child poem that she has written. And if you look at the body of her poems, again, what one finds is the child image is very strong. Perhaps that is why she has been she has been earmarked as a very romantic, very realistic kind of, very symbolic kind of writer in the Keatsian tradition. But I would say she is more in the Emily Dickinson tradition, where you find there is always a twist to the story that she is trying to say. This is a poem where where a child is drawing the outline of a body, but she can draw only the outline of the body, and she knows that life is missing. Like a child, she has to turn to her mother to find the heart in it, against the emptiness she has created. So the fear of the child. Now, this particular poem really leads us to one of our major poems, which is called The Garden, which is divided into 5 parts. And in the tradition of T.S. Eliot, Wasteland, and here the 5 parts are very significantly titled. The first part is titled The Fear of Birth, followed by Garden, followed by The Fear of Love, followed by Origins, and the last one, which is called The Fear of Death. So you almost get this feeling here is individual talent working against a tradition that has gone before. And of course, as I said, it is a rewriting of all that has gone before. Now, in another of her poems, The New World, she talks about her father and her mother, as I said, the lead that has been strapped to her ankles. And when she had wanted to go to museums, I thought my father's death would free my mother. And in a sense, it has. She takes trips, looks at great art. But the last lines here, this is what is left of being alive. She is free in that sense, without relation to the earth. She's like an astronaut who somehow loses the ship and has to drift in space, knowing that however long it lasts, this is what is left of being alive. So we would say, is neither a child hater nor a man hater, because these are 2 epithets that have been put on her poetry, and critics have tried to read it like that. In one of her poems, in one of her early poems, she talks about children who are drowned in the flood. And there's a nonchalance with which she says that, well, they are drowned and that is the end of it. It is an understatement where she is trying to say that grief for the dead is something that is frozen like the frozen waters. Unless one realizes that and understands that, enjoying her poem is difficult. And this is the story of the world you have always known, but it has been arranged differently. You were a woman, you were a man. So that's one of the things that I would like to close this slide on, this presentation on, unless of course you want to read 2 more of her other poems, which talks about the full poem, The Garden, from the Wild Iris. The garden is again represented. The last poem that we have here is the mountain. And this is about the craft of writing. So far, I've been talking about the themes that she has been looking at. Now, what about her craft of writing? You must have noticed that all her poems are very lyrical. There is no rhythmic pattern to it. They are lines cut up and dependent on rhythm, on alliteration sometimes. Sometimes there is a metonymy that gets repeated uses of words. These are things that she constantly uses. And perhaps that is why she talks about all writing as climbing a mountain. In all our cultures, we have the story about Sisyphus, of the endless labor of Sisyphus, who pushes a rock up the mountain, knowing nothing would come of this effort because the stone would roll down again. She says writing is like that. It is an endless labor, but it is a labor of pleasure, because it is not it is it is not just the labor that uh, really makes a poet what she is, but it is the realization that at the end of all that labor, you are transformed by this burden with every breath. And now I'm standing at the top of the mountain, and we must say she is really standing at the top of the peak of the recognition that could have come to anyone who was a poet writing at this time, when she has her hands free and the rock has added height to the mountain. So and there's a gap in between these two lines, as you can see, where she's trying to say that it is the rock that makes you steady. It is to fight the challenges of life. And this is the message that she gives out to all women. Fight the challenges that come your way. Don't let the trials and tribulations of life snuff you out, because for every winter, there is a spring. Thank you.
Thank you,
Hello,
Jameela.
Usha.
You have such a wonderful lecture, and you have transported us into a world of beauty and made us forget about the pandemic and all the challenges that we have been talking about in the other webinars. It has been a wonderful experience. And if anybody wants to ask anything, you can do that now. There are, when in the first session, we had almost 70 participants. And in the second one, I think some people could not join back. We have only 46 now. If anyone would, Padmaji, you want to ask something?
Hello, this is a wonderful evening, absolutely marvelous. And listening to the speaker, she took us to the other world, and it looked like as if you are listening to her, the poet's original voice. It was very, very moving, very, very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Padmaji. Anybody else would like to add anything? I see that, I'm very grateful that many academicians have also joined us today. And I'm sure it owes a great deal to Jameela's reputation. And so many of our friends have come to listen to you. And many, from across the country, IWC members have also joined. So if any questions or any, Madam Jansi, would you like to say something?
Yeah, Usha.
Yeah, please do.
Yes, Usha. Yeah, it is really a feast to our ears to listen, since we all are fed up after listening too much around about Corona and this pandemic period. This presentation was really a feast to our ears, so much, because we enjoyed it, because you have, as Padmaji pointed out, you have taken us into a different world. We are experiencing standing on the mountains and walking through the forest and all. It was a nice presentation, Dr. Jameela. It is very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayalakshmi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jameela. It was so nice listening to you. And it was like sitting in a class, I could not get a copy of the poems of Glück. So I really enjoyed listening to you. And as one of the listeners said, it was a trip to gardens and snows and mountains, and it was lovely. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Jameela.
And thank you for joining us, madam.
Okay, welcome. It was really a wonderful time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And anybody else would like to add?
Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please go
Yes.
My name is Meera. I am an LP teacher from Neodale Secondary School. I feel so happy. And this is a wonderful experience for me. I also sit here as a student, ma'am.
Nice to have you with us. Nice to have you with us, and I'm sure I motivated you to read more of her poems.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Hello, Jameela. Hello, Jameela.
Hello.
Yeah, please.
Lakshmi
Yes.
Your talk was very nice, and you brought out all the beauty of her works, Gleek's works, the way what she wanted. The thing was very good. The presentation was very good, and I would love to hear more and more of your talks on various poets, because the essence of her work you brought out very clearly, Jameela.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Usha, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Meera from ISO. Another Meera here.
Yes.
Do you remember, Jameela? It's so nice that you shared. This was a wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, it was so nice, Jameela. It was so beautiful, especially the whole attempt to celebrate women and the way in which you interpreted Glück. It was really, really beautiful. I think like one of them said, almost like the original voice of the author. And I missed being your student or being in your class. But I think I could make it up a little bit. It was so nice to see you and the way in which you interpreted, and particularly the cyclical interpretation that you gave, beautiful. And Snowdrops is one of my favorites actually, and picked it up, and even the Wild Iris. And I use it a lot. So I'm not from the English, faculty, but I use it a lot for my development studies and women's studies teaching.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear.
Oh, yeah. There's a big difference in the way in which you could, it's wonderful when you bring in literature and poetry into your multidisciplinary approach. It's beautiful. I don't know if this is a group where you constantly have a interaction. Do you have something like that? Because I'm hoping and proposing that we should have at least a monthly meet with Jameela, JB, the famous JB.
Actually, Usha is coordinating it.
No, this is a from All India Women's
Usha,
Conference.
actually, it was nice that you were able to.
Yeah, but
we
normally have on issues that are concerning women, and this is the first time that we have had a talk on such a topic. Earlier talks about, going beyond COVID. So we were talking about sustainable lifestyles and healthy living, and other things. But you can just give me your contact so that I can send you invites for our future webinars. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, and great work. Okay, keep it up, and it's a wonderful, especially in this pandemic period. It's beautiful.
Jameela, I'm Kamini speaking. Can you hear me,
Kamini.
Jameela?
Yeah, go on.
Yes.
It was a wonderful presentation. Transported us to nature, garden and whatnot. It was so nice picturing them. It would come in front of our eyes, whatever you were explaining. So at the end of the day, you see that whatever problems you have, you definitely emerge victorious, isn't it?
Yes, women are the victorious ones. They emerge victorious at the end of it because they know how to handle situations.
That is a good thing. That this day is good, is made, because we have to emerge victorious.
Jameela ma'am, hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Audible?
Yes. Please go on, Shanti.
Your lecture made me realize how I am missing reading this type of poems. So I may take up reading poems again at this age, I think. After
Oh, that's
long
really good.
time, I'm listening to a lecture on poems. I just loved it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, Shanti.
Thank you, Ushaji.
Jemmy, can I also add my voice
Yes, yes.
to this
please go
general
ahead.
chorus? It was lovely.
Radhika,
And
yes.
I'm so happy that I tuned in. And you've really familiarized us with what to me is a new poet. So I'm not very much into poetry, but definitely after listening to you, I might want to read this particular poet once again. And of course, your poems, I'm
Yeah.
always ready to listen. Thank you so much for
One
this
thing,
evening.
Radhika, one thing that I found very interesting in this writer was that she is also very fond of flowers and the
Okay, I
garden.
know. Yes. In fact, when you were explaining about, her poetry and it came to this topic of flowers, I was just thinking that, the one, I mean, our school interaction about flowers and your poem
Yeah.
on the flowers. Very interesting.
Thank you, Radhika. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Usha.
Hope you will join
Yeah,
us.
Yes,
thanks a lot to Usha.
exactly. Yes, Usha, I should also thank you for this opportunity of listening to Jameela's talk. And as Radhika said, it is true, that flowers, it brought us back to our school. Of course, where we wrote about flowers. And definitely this poet, somebody, I think she is like a companion for women, this poet, because she gives us hope, she gives us courage, and a little and self-confidence or whatever. She makes the room or the world brighter for us with her poems. That is one thing I would like to add.
Yeah,
Well deserved
that's what
Nobel.
Jameela has already said. Yes, you have
Yes,
added some
yes,
more
yes.
beauty to what she has already
Yeah,
said.
very well
Thank
deserved
you.
award.
Can I speak a few words?
Yes.
Can
Yes,
I,
please.
Ushaji?
Yeah, please.
Bhuvaneshwari here. Yeah.
Yes.
It was actually, it was a real great change for all of us, the ARWC members. We have all been hearing so many, everything related to pandemic and Ayurveda and everything. Now, this was a great change. Thank you so much for that. And Jameela ji, your talk was really good. Particularly, of course, everything was good about the poetry and everything, but the last part of it, the Sisyphus rolling down, rolling the stone up the mountain, and then leaving it rolls down. So basically, that is what we are all are doing. This philosophy is all about that futility of what we are doing. We keep on doing, and ultimately, what happens? That is a
Yeah, but
philosophy.
then
Really.
at the end of the poem, she says she will have the rock up there and the rock will add height to the mountain. So that is the
Yeah,
woman at the epic.
yes. But that was a great thing, that positivity. She ended with the positivity. That was a real good, we really liked it. I really liked it.
She
Thank
was
you
a
so
woman
much.
who went through a lot of tragedy in her life. And for someone who has gone through so much of tragedy to emerge so optimistic and ready to face the challenges, that is something I think is what makes her a great writer.
Yeah,
A great
and
human.
ultimately the Nobel Prize also. That was for literature, for a woman.
Good evening, Jameela ma'am.
Yes.
I'm Gayatri.
Yeah, please.
Can you hear, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm Gayatri.
Yeah,
So
you can
I'm
turn
so
your camera also.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
Yes.
I'm so happy to be in your class. I felt like I'm sitting in your class again. Like the beauty of the beauty of your class is again recreated, no doubt at all. As I believe that Jansi ma'am also said this. Sitting in your class was really a pleasure for me, and hearing your talk is something which flows like river. And actually, the class, this session has. I have never read the poems by Gleek, but I think that your talk has motivated me to um, read the poems, especially those poems which have got mythological references. I have a particular liking to mythology, so I think, or I hope that very soon I will be reading those poems with those mythological references, ma'am. So thank you for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to hear such a wonderful talk. Thank you. Thank you, Usha ma'am, for again, as everyone has said, we have been hearing a lot about the pandemic, COVID-19 situations, the treatments, the health issues, etc., etc., etc. In in such a condition, this kind of talks and sessions are really a welcome and a soothing effect for us. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for
so much.
organizing such a good seminar.
I think, now we have to wind up. We are coming to the end of our time slot. Thank you, Jameela, especially for giving such a wonderful lecture. And we all spent a wonderful evening forgetting about all our worries and challenges. And we were in a totally beautiful world, altogether different from where we are now. And I thank all members who have joined, all AWC members and office bearers. And special thanks to all the, very senior people from the academic field I can see, though I don't want to mention all the names. Thank you so much. And we hope that we will get your encouragement for all our future webinars also. We'll be continuing this. And if you can get in touch with us, we'll definitely include you in our invites, and we can be meeting more often. Thank you so much. I think with this, we can wind up. Thank you, Jameela, again.
Thank you, Usha, for this wonderful opportunity to say something at this forum. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I may just add at the end that Jameela was a college mate. So we have known each other for almost 5 decades.